Hello and a very warm welcome to this week's Out and About. Now, with the topic of Brexit leaving pretty much everyone scratching their heads wondering what's going on, one of the key questions which still remains is what happens to the UK-India relations once Brexit comes into effect. Recently, the Democracy Forum held a very interesting seminar at the Washington Hotel in London to discuss just that.
We're extremely privileged and proud to be hosting this event today with the Democracy Forum as the keynote panel, who will give their opening remarks on the state of the relationship will now begin and will commence with the conference. So thank you very much.
Well, I think as the world becomes increasingly global, but we have the rise of authoritarian powers and changes to the global rules-based order, it's important for fellow democracies, particularly those with a common history, to work closer together. So we're hoping to bring India and UK, who have a long shared history, not always good, but anyway, we want to bring them closer together, both politically, economically, and this realm of security.
The seminar is Global Britain and India, a new special relationship. And I think, therefore, I need to answer two questions. So what is this thing called Global Britain? And what then, if we know what Global Britain is the UK-India proposition in that? What is this special relationship? So what is Global Britain? Very rapidly. What we say, what we hold true to, is that it is an open, inclusive and outward-facing Britain, playing a leading role in the world, having a new partnership with Europe, reinvesting in its relationships with elsewhere in the world, championing free trade and international justice, and standing by a set of values, those being human dignity, human rights, freedom, democracy and equality. So that's Global Britain in some very short headlines. The UK-India proposition for that is that we, in the UK, believe that there is a natural partnership to be had between Britain as one of the world's oldest democracies and India as its largest and most successful democracy. We have a shared set of values. It was Prime Minister Modi who was good enough to give us the phrase "the living bridge" between our two countries, a phrase we have been mercilessly prosecuting ever since. It's a wonderful image of a intercommunity of people who are tied together personally, professionally, culturally, institutionally, and through language and legal traditions. And we have over 1.5 million Indians, diaspora, here in the United Kingdom, making the country very great in all walks of life.
Indeed, it's a very timely moment to have this seminar, and I think the Henry Jackson Society and the Democracy Forum have really come together to make for a really strong and enriching debate. Why is it important? For the simple reason that I think if Global Britain is to succeed, it must succeed with its good friend India. That's the headline. And what we had with Prime Minister Modi's visit only recently to the United Kingdom was a strong affirmation of our relationship in a post-Brexit world, centred around a technology partnership above all, but it goes much wider than technology. It goes to issues of shared values, shared traditions and global partnership for the global good. So it's a really excellent time to be having the debate.
Well, this is a very critical time for Britain. It has obviously a relationship with India which stretches back almost to the 17th century, where Britain is going to find itself having to negotiate a whole series of free trade treaties and probably considering new strategic alliances, specifically with countries in the Asia-Pacific region. And India is going to be a very prominent target. There's no doubt that the pipeline of diplomatic activity between India and the UK has begun to flow much more freely in the last 5 years. And the Democracy Forum and its sister publication, Asian Affairs, have been following this process of increasing engagement very closely.
I think what I'd like to do is interrogate what is so special about the UK-India relationship, because while there's a lot of potential, what we see in reality is a lot of problems. So what I'd like to do is discuss some of the dissonance that we're seeing at the moment between, on the one hand, this trade rhetoric that says, whether it's Theresa May or Liam Fox, it's really important for us to have a relationship with India vis-a-vis what they're actually doing when it comes to visa allocations, the visa process, and some of the anti-terrorism legislation that we're seeing being used at the moment to deport highly skilled migrants. So my argument is that actually, unless you're able to bridge these different narratives and find a way forward that talks about what's in the best interest of both countries, then the UK is in danger of losing a special relationship. There is a special relationship, question mark. I don't think one can assume that it is a special relationship, because I think there are particular issues at the moment that are putting this relationship under strain that one should take seriously, think about in the round, in order to think through, okay, well, how do you strengthen the relationship than assume it's a strong relationship? So when we say the UK, well, who do we mean? Is it the UK of Theresa May and Liam Fox, who say this is an important trading partner? We have a shared history, we have shared values. We want to capitalise literally on these historical links. Or is it the Theresa May who refused under ministerial pressure to lift the cap on Tier 2 professional visas and under immense pressure then did a U-turn? Is it the Home Office that insisted on counting students within net migration figures? So I don't think we can discount this, because the reality is, since these immigration reforms have come into place, what we have seen is a dramatic reduction in the number of Indian students who are willing to come to the UK to study. And even though there's been a slight increase recently, in net figures it's only a few thousand people. And I think it matters. There was a British Council report that said to Indians, what is the appeal of the UK as a destination country? And number one was education. So certainly you can look at those figures and think there's a sense that the UK is not welcoming of Indian students.
It's a very timely discussion, and I compliment the organisers for putting this event together. We are at a very interesting conjuncture of history, with Britain seeking to define for itself and then navigate a refashioned role for itself in the world post-Brexit, and India, with which Britain has had, to state the obvious, long-standing historical links, and India being also poised as an emerging power on the global stage. How this self-redefinition of Britain and its role in the world can connect to India's emergence and India's aspirations. Let me try and pick up where Champa was heading and highlight a few key and perhaps unnecessary irritants. There are three everyday irritants that I'll flag up. First of all, between 2012 and 2018, the number of student visas for higher education granted to Indian students, and therefore of the number of Indian students who come to the UK to go to university at either the undergraduate or the postgraduate level, has more than halved. From over 30,000 6 years ago to just around 15,000 or so today. In the meantime, over the same period, by way of comparison, Canada, the number of Indian students going to Canadian universities, and Canada also has, like the UK, a considerable number of world-class universities, has zoomed. It's kind of gone through the roof, to the extent that as of this year, the number of Indian students going to Canada for higher studies is 6 times the number coming to the United Kingdom. A second kind of irritant is that a 2-year multiple entry visa for an Indian tourist or an Indian business visitor costs approximately 5 times his or her Chinese counterpart. PRC, People's Republic of China counterpart, would pay for it. It's about 80 or 85 pounds for the Chinese, and the exact same 2-year multiple entry UK visa costs something like £400 for an Indian citizen. Anyone wanting to come here for either tourism or for or for business purposes.
Well, I think this is a very important time for the world to find out how well India is performing in terms of its economy. On paper, it looks fantastic, the fastest growing economy in the world, and there's been a huge amount of increased international investment in India. You've seen that in many sectors, in the railway industry, in healthcare and so on. But clearly there are still a lot of challenges to doing business in India, and that's something which is causing reservations, I think, to further investment. I've been making a list of some of the achievements which I think we've seen in the past few years under the Modi government. Has any country in the world attempted such a large-scale reform programme and such sweeping, wide-impact legislation across a very complex system? Under Modi, you've seen not only the improvements in terms of e-commerce, which means that more money is transferred by mobile phones than in cash, we've also seen safer trains, thanks partly to international investment and trade. More reliable insurance as a result of greater international competition, much less government paperwork. A lot of government services are now available online. Modern payment systems, and all of this has taken place in a country which has remained politically stable and largely peaceful.
Well, what a very fascinating seminar that most certainly was. I guess only time will tell once Brexit comes into effect next year. Time to take a short break, but there's much more still to come in part 2, so make sure you join us again in a few moments' time.